Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
The Alpine Vista Resort clung to the mountainside like something out of a fairy tale, all dark timber and glowing windows against the pristine Colorado snow. I'd come here for research. My editor wanted a romance novel set at a ski resort, and I'd never been skiing in my life. At 42, most people would call that a character flaw. I called it research material. The morning air bit at my cheeks as I stood at the base of the beginner slope, feeling ridiculous in my rental gear. Everything was too bright, too tight, too foreign. I was a creature of coffee shops and bookstores, not chairlifts and mobiles. But my publisher was paying for this research trip, and I needed to understand the world I was writing about. That's when I saw her. She was sprawled in the snow about 20 feet down the bunny hill, laughing so hard she couldn't get up. Her blonde hair had escaped from under her bright blue helmet, creating a halo against the white powder. Even from a distance, I could see she was young, probably late 20s, with the kind of natural beauty that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Need a hand? I called out, skiing clumsily toward her on my rented skis. She looked up at me, and I felt something shift in my chest. Her eyes were the color of winter morning sky, bright and clear and full of mischief. "Only if you promise not to laugh," she said, still giggling. "I've been down here for 5 minutes trying to figure out how to get these things back under me." I offered her my poles, and she grabbed them, using the leverage to pull herself upright. But as she did, one of her skis caught mine, and suddenly we were both going down, tangling together in a heap of limbs and laughter. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, trying to untangle herself from me. We were face to face in the snow, her breath warm against my cheek, and for a moment the world went very still. "Grace," I said, not sure why I was introducing myself while lying in a snowbank. "Willow," she replied, and something about the way she said it made me think of trees bending in the wind, graceful and strong. That's how I met Willow Scott, flat, on my back in the snow, 42 years old, and completely out of my depth in every possible way. What started as an embarrassing collision became the beginning of something I couldn't have scripted. Willow, it turned out, was as much a beginner as I was, despite being 15 years younger. She'd signed up for the week-long ski package on a whim after a bad breakup. She told me over hot chocolate in the lodge later that morning. I figured, if I was going to have a midlife crisis, I might as well do it somewhere with good powder, she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. Though I guess at 28, it's more of a quarter-life crisis. 28. The number hung between us like a flag I couldn't ignore. I was old enough to be her. Well, not her mother, but close. Old enough that people would notice the gap. Old enough that I should probably finish my hot chocolate and find someone my own age to ski with. Instead, I said, "Want to take the beginner lesson together? I have a feeling we could both use it." Her smile was radiant. "I was hoping you'd ask." The ski instructor, a bronze 20-something named Chad, clearly thought we were an odd pair, the middle-aged woman in designer, ski wear, and the young blonde in rental gear who couldn't stop making self-deprecating jokes. But Willow had a way of making everything feel like an adventure rather than a humiliation. "Pizza, pizza," Chad called out, referring to the wedge shape we were supposed to make with our skis to slow down. Willow immediately started making jokes about pepperoni and cheese, which made me laugh so hard I nearly fell over again. "You know," she said as we rode the lift up for our third run, "you're not what I expected when I saw you this morning." "What did you expect? Someone more intimidating, I guess? You look like you should be in a boardroom somewhere, making important decisions. Instead, you're here making pizza shapes and falling down mountains with me." I thought about telling her what I did for a living, but something held me back. For the first time in years, I was just Grace, not Grace Walker, the novelist. I was just a woman learning to ski, laughing with a beautiful stranger who made me feel younger than I had in decades. "Maybe that's exactly what I needed," I said. Instead, by the end of our first lesson, we could make it down the bunny hill without falling. By the end of our second day together, we were attempting green runs and talking like old friends. Willow was studying graphic design, she told me, freelancing while she figured out what she really wanted to do with her life. She'd grown up in small-town Montana, always dreaming of bigger things, but never quite sure what those things were. "What about you?" she asked as we sat in the lodge after our third day on the slopes. "What do you do when you're not learning to ski?" I'm a writer, I said, which was true enough. What kind of writing? Fiction, mostly. Romance novels. Her eyes lit up. Really? That's so cool. I love romance novels. There's something so hopeful about them, you know? Like no matter how complicated things get, love always finds a way. If only she knew how complicated things were about to get. It was on our fourth night at the resort that everything changed. We'd been meeting for drinks in the lodge bar after skiing, talking about books and life and dreams until the place nearly emptied around us. But that night, Willow suggested we take a bottle of wine up to her room instead. I have a better view, she said, and I told myself that's all this was about. The view. Her room was smaller than mine, but cozy, with a fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the mountains. The moon was full, casting silver light across the snow, making everything look magical and surreal. It's beautiful, I said, accepting the glass of wine she offered. It is, she agreed, but when I looked at her, she was looking at me, not the view. We settled on the couch in front of the fireplace, and somehow the conversation turned more personal than it had before. Willow told me about her ex-girlfriend, a woman named Sarah who'd left her for someone more stable, more mature. She said it without bitterness, but I could hear the hurt underneath. What about you? She asked. Ever been married? Once, I said, a long time ago. It didn't work out. Kids. No, we kept saying someday, but someday never came. I took a sip of wine, surprised by how easy it was to talk to her. I threw myself into my career instead. Sometimes I wonder if that was the right choice. Do you regret it? I considered the question. I used to think I didn't, but lately ... I don't know. Maybe I've been so focused on writing about love that I forgot to look for it myself. Willow was quiet for a moment, studying my face in the firelight. Then she said, Grace, can I ask you something? Of course. How old are you? The question I'd been dreading. 42. She nodded slowly. I thought so. Does it bother you that I'm 28? Should it? That's not what I asked. I set down my wine glass and looked at her directly. Yes, it bothers me. Not because of who you are, but because of what people would think. Because of what I think I should think. And what do you think? You should think that I'm too old for you. That this is inappropriate. That I should know better. Willow moved closer on the couch, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral that made me think of spring meadows. What if I told you that age is just a number? That I've never connected with anyone the way I've connected with you this week? I'd say you're young and idealistic and you don't know what you're talking about. She laughed, but it wasn't unkind. Maybe. Or maybe you're overthinking this. She reached out and touched my hand. Grace, I've been attracted to you since that first morning when we fell in the snow together. Not despite your age, just ... attracted to you. To your intelligence, your humor, the way you make me feel like I can be completely myself. My heart was racing. Willow ... quote. I know this is complicated. I know it's not what either of us planned, but can we just see what happens? Just for tonight? She was looking at me with those winter sky eyes, and I felt something inside me crumble. All my carefully constructed reasons why this was a bad idea seemed suddenly irrelevant compared to the warmth spreading through my chest. Just for tonight, I whispered. She leaned closer, and I could feel her breath against my lips. Just for tonight, she agreed. When she kissed me, it was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as I responded. She tasted like wine and possibility, and when her fingers tangled in my hair, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Desired, wanted, alive. We kissed for a long time on that couch, the fire crackling beside us and the moonlight streaming through the windows. When she finally pulled back, her cheeks were flushed and her lips were swollen. Grace, she whispered, and the way she said, my name made something flutter low in my stomach. Yes, I wanted to show you something. She stood up and took my hand, leading me toward the bedroom. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. This was crazy. This was reckless. This was everything I'd spent my adult life being too careful to do. In the bedroom. She turned to face me, her hands going to the buttons of her sweater. Is this okay? She asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She began unbuttoning slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. When she shrugged the sweater off her shoulders, revealing a simple white bra and smooth, pale skin, I felt my breath catch. Your turn, she said softly. With trembling fingers, I unbuttoned my own blouse, feeling exposed and vulnerable and more excited than I'd been in decades. When Willow reached out to touch my collarbone, tracing the line with her fingertip, I shivered. "You're beautiful," she whispered. "So beautiful." What happened next was tender and passionate and unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Willow touched me like I was precious, like every kiss and caress was something to be savored. She was patient with my nervousness, encouraging when I felt uncertain, passionate when I finally let myself go. Afterward, we lay tangled in the sheets, her head on my chest, both of us breathing hard. "So much for just tonight," she said, her voice muffled against my skin. I stroked her hair, feeling more content than I had in years. "So much for just tonight," I agreed. I woke up in Willow's bed as dawn was breaking over the mountains, her warm body curved against mine. For a moment, I let myself pretend this was normal, that I regularly woke up next to beautiful young women who made me feel like the most desirable person in the world. Then reality crashed back in. I was 42 years old. She was 28. This was a vacation fling, nothing more. In 2 days, we'd both go back to our real lives, and this would become just a beautiful memory. I tried to slip out of bed without waking her, but Willow stirred as I reached for my clothes. "Running away?" she asked sleepily. "I should get back to my room. People will talk if they see me leaving here this early." She sat up, the sheet falling away from her breasts, and I had to force myself to look away. "Grace, what are you afraid of?" "I'm not afraid. I'm being practical." "You're being scared?" I pulled on my blouse, not meeting her eyes. "Maybe there's a difference." "There isn't." She got out of bed, not bothering to cover herself, and came to stand in front of me. What we shared last night was real. Don't diminish it by pretending it was just a mistake. I'm not saying it was a mistake. I'm saying it was complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. I looked at her then, standing there naked and beautiful and so damn young, and felt my heart break a little. "Willow, you don't understand. In the real world, people our ages don't. We don't work. Says who? Society. Says experience. Says every romance novel I've ever written where the age gap creates impossible problems." She was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Then she said, "What if I told you I don't care what society thinks? What if I told you that last night was the most incredible night of my life, and I'd like to see where this goes?" I'd say you're 28 and you have time for incredible nights. I'm 42 and I should know better. The hurt that flashed across her face made me hate myself. "So that's it? One night and you're done?" I finished buttoning my blouse, not trusting myself to look at her. "That's what we agreed to. Things change, Grace. Feelings change." "Not mine," I lied. "I should go. I made it to the door before." She spoke again. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I think you're wrong. I think what we have is rare and beautiful and worth fighting for, but you have to want to fight for it too." I left without responding, but her words followed me down the hallway like ghosts. I spent the rest of my time at the resort avoiding Willow, which was harder than it should have been in a place that size. I threw myself into my research, interviewing staff members and taking notes about the setting for my novel. I told myself I was being professional, practical, mature. I told myself I wasn't heartbroken. On my last morning, I was checking out at the front desk when I heard a familiar laugh behind me. I turned to see Willow saying goodbye to the ski. Instructor Chad, her face bright with the kind of easy happiness I'd briefly been part of. Our eyes met across the lobby, and for a moment, everything else faded away. She looked like she wanted to say something, but then my taxi honked outside, and the moment was broken. "Safe travels," she said simply. "You too," I managed. I didn't look back as I got into the taxi, but I felt her watching me drive away. 3 weeks later, I was back in my apartment in Chicago, trying to turn my ski resort research into a workable novel outline when my editor called. "Grace, darling," Vivian's voice crackled through the phone. "I have news. I'm retiring next month." My stomach dropped. Vivian had been my editor for 10 years, through 5 bestsellers and countless revisions. She understood my voice, my process, my neuroses about deadlines and character development. "Congratulations," I said weakly. "Don't sound so devastated. I'm handing you over to someone wonderful. Young, fresh perspective, absolutely brilliant. You're going to love her." "Her?" "Willow Scott. She's been working with some of our newer authors, and her instincts are incredible. Plus, she specifically requested to work with you. Apparently. She's a huge fan of your work." The phone slipped from my numb fingers. "Willow Scott, my Willow." The woman I'd slept with and then abandoned at a ski resort was going to be my new editor. Grace, are you there? I picked up the phone with shaking hands. I'm here. She's coming by your apartment tomorrow afternoon to discuss your next project. I think you two are going to work beautifully together. If only she knew. Spent the next 24 hours in a state of controlled panic. I cleaned my apartment 3 times, changed clothes 4 times, and rehearsed at least a dozen ways to pretend I didn't know who Willow Scott was. None of them seemed believable. When my doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock, I considered not answering. I could claim I was sick, that I'd forgotten about the meeting, that I'd spontaneously decided to move to Tibet and take up yak farming. Instead, I opened the door. Willow stood in my hallway wearing a professional black dress and heels, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked older, more polished than she had at the resort, but her eyes were the same winter sky blue, and when she saw me, her professional smile faltered just slightly. Hello, Grace. Willow. My voice came out as barely a whisper. May I come in? We have a lot to discuss. I stepped back to let her enter, my heart pounding as she walked past me into my living room. She looked around with interest, taking at my bookshelves, my writing desk, the framed book covers on the walls. So, you're Grace Walker? She said, turning to face me. The Grace Walker, best-selling romance novelist. When you said you were a writer, you neglected to mention you were famous. I don't feel famous. 5 New York Times bestseller says otherwise. She set her briefcase on my coffee table and sat down on my couch. Why didn't you tell me who you were? I remained standing, needing the distance. Would it have mattered? It might have explained why you ran away like I had the plague. The hurt in her voice was barely concealed, and I felt my chest tighten. Willow, what happened at the resort was unprofessional on my part, she interrupted. I want you to know that I didn't request to be your editor because of our ... history. I requested it because I've been reading your work for years, and I genuinely believe I can help make your next book even better. And what happened between us? She met my eyes directly. What happened between us was personal. This is professional. I'm perfectly capable of keeping them separate if you are. I studied her face, looking for any sign of the playful, passionate woman I'd known at the resort. She was buried somewhere beneath this polished professional facade, but she was still there. I could see glimpses of her in the way Willow's fingers drummed against her knee and the slight flush in her cheeks. Can you, I asked, keep them separate? I'm here, aren't I? She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. I've read your existing work, and I have some thoughts about your next project. Vivian mentioned you were working on a ski resort romance. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Yes, tell me about it. For the next hour, we discussed plot points and character development like the professionals we were. Willow's insights were sharp and thoughtful, her suggestions creative and practical. She understood my writing style instinctively, and several times she finished thoughts I hadn't quite articulated myself. It should have been purely business. It would have been, if not for the way she unconsciously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking, or the way her eyes lit up when she got excited about a plot twist. It would have been business if I could have forgotten the way she'd looked at me in the firelight, or the way she'd whispered my name in the darkness. Grace? She was looking at me with concern. You seemed distracted. Sorry, long day. Maybe we should continue this another time. I know this situation is ... awkward. Awkward is one word for it. 2 weeks later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Elegant, simple, with a note in Willow's handwriting. It would mean a lot to me if you could be there. I RSVP'd yes, though I had no idea how I was going to get through watching the woman I loved marry someone else, even if it was just for convenience. The wedding was held in a small event space in downtown Chicago, decorated with simple white flowers and candles. There were maybe 30 people there, family close, friends, a few colleagues. I sat in the back, trying to be invisible. Willow looked beautiful in a simple cream-colored dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. James was handsome in an understated way, clearly nervous but genuinely fond of his bride. They made a lovely couple, and if you didn't know the truth, you'd think it was a real wedding, but I knew the truth. I could see it in the way Willow's eyes searched the crowd during the ceremony, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, the way she kept glancing toward the back of the room where I was sitting. After the ceremony, during the small reception, she found me at the bar. Thank you for coming, she said, standing close enough that I could smell her perfume. Thank you for inviting me. Grace, I want you to know. Don't, I interrupted. Whatever you're going to say, don't. You made the right choice, the smart choice, did I? She looked at me with those winter sky eyes, and I could see all the things she wasn't saying because it doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm running away. Sometimes running away is the brave thing to do, and sometimes it's just running away. Before I could respond, James appeared at her elbow, smiling politely at me. You must be Grace, he said, extending his hand. I've heard so much about you. Willow says you're an incredible writer. She's being kind, I said, shaking his hand and trying not to think about what else Willow might have told him. Actually, James said, glancing between us with obvious understanding, I was hoping I could talk to both of you for a minute, privately. He led us to a quiet corner of the reception space, away from the other guests. Then he said, Look, I don't know exactly what happened between you two, but I know my wife well enough to recognize when she's in love with someone else. Willow flushed bright red. James, let me finish. He held up a hand. This marriage is a business arrangement, nothing more. We're helping each other out, but that doesn't mean Willow has to put her personal life on hold for the next year. What are you saying? I asked. I'm saying that if two people love each other, they should be together. Life's too short for anything else. He looked at me directly. And from what I can see, you're both too stubborn to figure that out on your own. James's words haunted me for the next 3 weeks. Willow and I continued our professional relationship, but there was a wall between us now, polite and impenetrable. She was leaving for London in a month, and we both pretended that everything was normal. It wasn't until she missed our scheduled meeting without calling that I realized something was wrong. I tried her phone, got voicemail. Tried her apartment. No answer. Finally, I called James. She's at Northwestern Memorial, he said, his voice tight with worry. Food poisoning, but a bad case. She's been there since yesterday. I was in my car before he finished talking. I found Willow in a private room, looking pale and exhausted but awake. She seemed surprised to see me. Grace, what are you doing here? James called me. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck. She tried to sit up straighter, wincing. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did. I sat down in the chair beside her bed, reaching for her hand before I could stop myself. When I heard you were sick, nothing else mattered. She looked down at our joined hands, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. Grace, I can't keep doing this. Pretending we're just colleagues, pretending I don't feel anything for you. It's killing me, I know. The words came out as barely a whisper. It's killing me too. Then why are we doing it? I looked at her lying there in the hospital bed, so young and beautiful and vulnerable, and felt something break open in my chest. All my careful reasons, all my fears about age and appropriateness and what people would think, none of it mattered compared to the woman in front of me. Because I'm terrified, I said finally. I'm terrified that I'm too old for you, that you'll wake up one day and realize you've wasted your youth on someone who's already lived half her life. I'm terrified that I don't know how to be in love anymore, that I'll disappoint you or hurt you or drive you away. And I'm terrified that you'll never give us a real chance, she said, squeezing my hand. That you'll keep pushing me away because you think you know what's best for me better than I do. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our honesty hanging between us. I leave for London in 3 weeks, she said finally. I know. Come with me. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Come with me to London. You can write anywhere, and I don't want to spend a year pretending to be married to James while being in love with you. Willow, that's crazy. Your fellowship, your career, will still be there whether you come with me or not. But this might not be. She turned to face me fully, her eyes intense. Grace, I'm asking you to take a leap of faith. With me, not because it's practical or sensible or what people expect, but because I love you and I think you love me too. I do love you, I said, the words coming out in a rush. I've been in love with you since that first night at the resort, maybe even since that first morning when we fell in the snow together, but love isn't always enough. It's enough for me. You're 28, stop using my age as an excuse. Her voice was stronger now, more determined. I'm 28 years old, which means I'm old enough to know my own mind, old enough to make my own choices, old enough to fight for what I want, and what I want is you. I looked at her, really looked at her. Not as the young woman I was too old for, not as the student who didn't know better, but as Willow. Brilliant, passionate, determined Willow, who had turned my world upside down and made me feel more alive than I had in years. If I come to London, I said slowly, what happens to your marriage? James and I will figure it out. Maybe we'll get a quiet divorce after the fellowship ends. Maybe we'll stay legally married for his immigration status, but live separate lives. The point is, it was never real. What we have is real. And if it doesn't work out between us, if we get to London and realize we were caught up in the romance of it all, then at least we'll know. At least we'll have tried. She reached up with her free hand to touch my face. Grace, I'd rather have 6 months with you than 60 years with anyone else. The simple truth of it broke down the last of my defenses. You realize I'm going to worry constantly that I'm holding you back from someone younger, someone more appropriate. And you realize I'm going to spend every day showing you that you're exactly the person I want to be with. This is insane. The best love stories usually are. I leaned down and kissed her then, soft and gentle, because she was still recovering, but full of all the promise I'd been too scared to offer before. Okay, I whispered against her lips. Okay, I'll come to London with you. All right. You'll edit, and we'll see what happens when we stop running away from each other. Her smile was radiant, brighter than any sun I'd ever seen. Really? But I have one condition. Anything. When we get back from London, I want to take you skiing again. Properly this time. She laughed, the sound filling the sterile. Hospital room with warmth. Deal. Though I should warn you, I've gotten much better at pizza turns. I'm counting on it. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of visa applications, apartment sublets, and arrangements. James was surprisingly supportive of our plan, even offering to help with the logistics of Willow's fellowship program. I've been married to her for exactly 1 month. He told me over coffee while Willow was at her pre-departure meetings, and I can already tell she's never going to be happy unless she's with you. Besides, this way I get to tell people my wife ran off with a famous novelist. It's very dramatic. I'm not that famous. You're famous enough. And more importantly, you make Willow happy in a way I've never seen before. My editor, former editor, was less thrilled about the arrangement. You're moving to London for a year? Grace, darling, what about your deadlines? I can write in London just as well as I can write in Chicago. Better, maybe. New inspiration and all that. This is about that girl, isn't it? Your new editor? I didn't bother denying it. Her name is Willow, and yes, it's about her. There was a long pause. Well, Vivian said finally, I suppose if you're going to have a midlife crisis, you might as well have it somewhere with good theater. The day before we left, Willow and I sat in my nearly empty apartment, surrounded by suitcases and the few boxes I was shipping overseas. Are you sure about this? I asked for the 100th time. It's not too late to change your mind, Grace. She took my hands in hers, looking at me with those winter sky eyes that had first undone me. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, have you? I thought about it honestly. The practical part of my brain was screaming that this was reckless, that I was appending my entire life for a woman I'd known for less than a year. But the rest of me, the part that had been hibernating for decades until Willow woke it up, was humming with excitement. No, I said finally. I've never been more sure of anything either. London was everything I'd imagined and nothing I'd expected. We found a small flat in Bloomsbury, close to Willow's fellowship program and walking distance from the British Museum. It was cramped by American standards, but charming, with tall windows that let in the gray London light and a tiny kitchen, where we learned to make tea properly. Willow threw herself into her work with characteristic passion, diving into projects with established British editors who had decades of experience. She would come home in the evenings full of stories about manuscript acquisitions and publishing trends, her eyes bright with professional excitement. I was supposed to be working on my ski resort romance, but instead found myself starting something entirely new. A story about a middle-aged woman who falls in love with her much younger editor and has to choose between safety and possibility. That's not autobiographical at all, Willow said one evening, reading over my shoulder as I worked at our tiny kitchen table. All fiction is autobiographical to some extent. Does this mean I get co-writing credit? You get inspiration credit? She leaned down to kiss the top of my head. I'll take it. Our first few months together weren't without challenges. There were moments when our age difference felt more pronounced, when Willow wanted to go out to clubs and I preferred quiet evenings at home, when she referenced cultural touchstones from her childhood that were completely foreign to me, when I worried about the gray hairs that seemed to multiply daily. But there were more moments when our differences felt like strengths. Willow's youthful energy pushed me out of my comfort zone, encouraged me to try new restaurants and explore neighborhoods I might have avoided on my own. My experience and stability gave her a sense of security she'd never had in previous relationships, a foundation that allowed her to take creative risks in her work. And the physical chemistry that had combusted between us at the ski resort only grew stronger with time and familiarity. Willow was an enthusiastic and generous lover, uninhibited in her desires and encouraging of mine. She had a way of making me feel beautiful and desirable that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with the way she looked at me, touched me, responded to me. "I love your hands," she told me one morning as we lay in bed, tracing the lines on my palms. "They're strong and capable, and they know exactly how to touch me. They're old hands. They're experienced hands. There's a difference." It was moments like these that made me understand what James had meant about life being too short for anything but love. 6 months into our London adventure, my ski resort romance was published to excellent reviews and strong sales. The book tour had to be done virtually due to our location, but the media attention was significant enough that entertainment reporters started asking about my personal life. Grace Walker has been notably private about her romantic relationships. One interviewer noted during a video call, "Are you seeing anyone special?" I glanced off camera to where Willow was sitting at our kitchen table, grading manuscripts and pretending not to listen. We talked about this moment, about whether we were ready to go public with our relationship. "I am," I said finally. "I'm in a relationship with someone who makes me very happy." "Anyone we might know?" "She's in publishing as well, but she prefers to stay out of the spotlight." It was the first time I'd publicly acknowledged dating a woman, and the first time I confirmed I was in a relationship at all. The interviewer moved on to other topics, but I could see Willow smiling at the kitchen table. That evening, she crawled into bed beside me and said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not hiding us anymore. For being willing to be seen with me." "Willow, I was never hiding you because I was ashamed of you. I was hiding because I was scared. I know. But it still hurts sometimes, feeling like your secret." I pulled her closer, pressing my face into her hair. "You're not my secret anymore. You're my life." The response to my casual coming out was mostly positive, though there were inevitably some comments about the age difference when photos of us together surfaced online. Willow handled it with more grace than I did, laughing off the speculation and focusing on her work. "Let them talk," she said when I got upset about a particularly nasty blog post. "The people who matter know who we really are." As Willow's fellowship year drew to a close, we had to make decisions about our future. Her program had been so successful that she'd been offered a permanent position with a prestigious London publishing house. I'd been offered a multi-book contract with a British publisher who wanted to capitalize on my growing UK readership. We could stay in London, build a life together in a city that had given us space to figure out who we were as a couple. Or we could go back to Chicago, to the life and career I'd built over decades. "What do you want to do?" Willow asked as we walked through Hyde Park on a rare sunny afternoon. "I want to do whatever makes you happiest." That's not an answer. I stopped walking and turned to face her. The truth? I want to go back to the ski resort where we met. I want to take you skiing like I promised. And then I want to ask you to marry me properly, for real, not for convenience or immigration status, but because I can't imagine spending the rest of my life with anyone else. Willow's eyes went wide. "Grace, I know we haven't talked about marriage. I know you're technically married to James and would have to get divorced first. I know I'm asking you to give up an incredible opportunity here. But Willow, I love you and I want to make this official in every way that matters." She was quiet for so long, I started to panic. Then she said, "James and I have already talked about getting divorced. The fellowship is over and he's got his green card situation sorted out. We were just waiting for the right time. And the job offer here is flattering, but not worth staying in London without you." She stepped closer, taking my hands in hers. "Grace, are you really asking me to marry you in the middle of Hyde Park?" "I'm asking if you'd be open to the possibility of me asking you to marry you somewhere more romantic." She laughed, the sound bright and clear in the London air. "I'd be very open to that possibility." We returned to Chicago in late spring, just as the city was shaking off the last of winter. Everything looked different through the lens of our year away, smaller somehow, but also more familiar and welcoming. James met us at the airport, and I was struck again by how genuinely fond he and Willow were of each other. Their divorce was amicably proceeding, and he'd started dating someone seriously, a fellow academic who appreciated his dry sense of humor. So, he said as we loaded our luggage into his car, "Are you two going to make this legal, or do I get to keep calling myself Willow's husband indefinitely?" "We're working on it," Willow said, grinning at me across the back seat. "Good, because I've gotten very tired of explaining to people why my wife lives with another woman." We spent 2 weeks getting reestablished in Chicago, finding a new apartment together, setting up our respective home offices, reconnecting with friends and colleagues. The publishing world welcomed us back with interest in our London project, and we found ourselves fielding offers to collaborate professionally as well as personally. But through it all, I was planning something more important than any book deal. 3 months after our return to Chicago, I told Willow I had a research trip planned to Colorado, a follow-up to my ski resort romance that required some additional location scouting. "Do you want me to come with you?" she asked, looking up from the manuscript she was editing. "Actually, I was hoping you would. I could use your input on some of the details." She agreed, and 2 weeks later, we were driving up the familiar mountain road to Alpine Vista Resort. It looked exactly the same as it had 2 years earlier, the same dark timber and glowing windows, the same pristine snow coating the slopes. "This brings back memories," Willow said as we checked into our room, a suite this time, with a fireplace and the same spectacular mountain views. "Good memories?" "The best memories." She wrapped her arms around my waist from behind as I stood at the window. "This is where it all started." "This is where it all starts," I corrected. "What do you mean?" I turned in her arms and dropped to one knee, pulling out the ring I'd been carrying for weeks. It was a simple solitaire, elegant and classic, with a band that would complement the anchor pendant she still wore every day. "Willow Scott," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "2 years ago, you literally fell into my life on a snowy mountain, and you've been turning my world upside down ever since. You've made me braver, happier, more alive than I ever thought possible. You've shown me that love doesn't follow rules or timelines or social expectations. It just is, powerful and transformative and worth every risk." She was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks as she looked down at me. "I know I'm older than you. I know people will always comment on our age difference. I know I can't promise you decades and decades together the way a younger partner could. But I can promise you this. I will love you with everything I have for as long as I have. I will support your dreams, celebrate your successes, and stand by you through whatever challenges come our way. I will never again let fear make decisions for us." I held up the ring, my hands trembling. "Willow Scott, will you marry me? For real this time, forever this time?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." I slipped the ring onto her finger and she pulled me up to kiss her, both of us laughing and crying and holding each other as if we'd never let go.